want to talk about senses and how it is so important to manage the input to our sensory processing in order to feel relaxed, feel comfortable, and help our children avoid meltdowns. So we've got 5 senses. We all learned about our 5 senses at school. We've got hearing, sight, touch, smell, and taste. And these 5 senses can be all very different when you've got sensory processing disorder. You can either be undersensitive to these senses, so therefore you need a lot more to feel comfortable, or you can be oversensitive, which means that you need less in order to be fulfilled in that sense. Now I'm going to explain this to you. I'm going to show you with 2 different cups. So if you are oversensitive, that means you don't need a lot to feel comfortable. So if you're oversensitive, you're going to need a small cup for that sense. And if you're undersensitive, you need a lot more input in order to get that satisfaction. And that is shown by the large cup or the large glass. So a good example is hearing. Reese is very oversensitive to sound. He cannot tolerate a lot of that sound. And if he has a lot coming in, he can get distressed very, very quickly. So this is his hearing sense. It is a small glass. So Reese, my son, if he walks into a busy area, that sound will fill up or give him the required input very, very quickly. Now, as soon as his cup's filled up, he is satisfied with the amount of sound. But if that place is very, very loud and very busy, it will keep going and it will overflow and he will be in a distressed mode or result in a meltdown. So we have to find ways to manage that. Alternatively, in regards to touch, Reese is very undersensitive to touch. That means he needs a lot of input, a lot of tactile play in order to feel comfortable for the amount of sensory input he gets from touch. So if this is his touch sense or his feeling sense, he needs a lot of input all the time in order to feel comfortable, which is very different to his audible or his hearing sense. Now, how this works in terms of meltdowns is we need to ensure we have the right level within these glasses or these quotas of sense to feel balanced throughout the day. And if any time those are empty or flown over, that's when we get frustrated, annoyed, and result in meltdowns. So it's very important to manage our sensory input throughout the day. Now, a fantastic example of this is people ask me all the time, well, my son is spinning all the time in the house. How can I stop him? Because I don't want him to be spinning constantly. Now, what you've got to realize is that if you are worried about the safety of a sense, you can replace that, but you've got to replace it with something that still gives that input. But what you've also got to realize is that if your child is undersensitive, they're going to need constant top-ups of their glass in order to keep it at a level. Because if you restrict that sense, they are going to be empty in that sense, and then they're going to lead to a meltdown or frustration. A really good example of this, even though we talk about the 5 senses, there are actually closer to 20 or 30 senses that the experts talk about. So a really good example of this is hunger. Hunger is one of our senses. So if you don't eat for the whole day and you get home and you open up the fridge, you've not topped up that sense of hunger. So you're going to eat the entire contents of anything you can see in the fridge. You're trying to fill up your glass, your hunger sense. Okay. As well as that, when you get home, you're probably frustrated because you're so hungry that you're just going to grab, and then you're probably going to overfill that glass and you're going to be uncomfortable, frustrated, fatigued in regards to that sense. So it's exactly the same in terms of our children. If they're undersensitive to a sense, we've got to keep those top-ups constant throughout the day. So if this is a movement sense, let them spin. Find apparatus for them to spin. Let them have a trampoline to jump up and down on. Let them go on the swing and give those constant breaks to top up that sense. On the other side, if they are oversensitive to a sense, as in my example in terms of Reese's hearing, and when you went into a really noisy room, what you can do is you can put in place different strategies in order to manage that. So one of the obvious one is ear defenders to reduce that sense so that your child is not getting as much audible input and therefore that glass is not overflowing as quickly as it should. Alternatively, the great thing about senses is that you can train them and you can manage them. So what this means is that if you introduce those inputs to your child very slowly over a long period of time, their senses will become resistant to it. So they'll be able to tolerate it for a lot longer. So in terms of hearing, you can actually put a low sound, and over a number of the years, subjecting your child to a sense at a tolerable level, not letting that glass overflow, you can actually allow them to get used to it and the sense to accept it and generate those messages in the brain. So on a closing note, what I suggest you do is get a piece of paper, write down the 5 senses that I've spoken about, and determine whether your child is over or undersensitive, and then work out your plan in order to manage them, whether it is to provide additional sensory input during the day or to find devices, methods to reduce that sensory input on the ones that they are oversensitive to. And this management of their senses will reduce that glass overflowing or staying empty, and therefore reduce frustration and reduce meltdowns. So let me know how you get on with your sensory diet for your child, and please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Please follow on Facebook and other social media channels, and leave any comments below or questions, and I'd love to hear from you.